time to dial in some metal tones, guys, and today we're testing out the Blackstar AMPED with my 7-string guitar. I wanted to hear how this thing holds up with the 7-string with those lower notes. Now, of course, you heard a little clip in the intro. More of that to come, so you want to hang around for the whole video. But I am going to take you guys behind the scenes on how I got these tones, how I dialed these in, what I used as far as cabinets go. So this actually has some cabinet and mic software, but that's not the only tone we're testing here, and it's not the only tone you heard in that full mix there. I actually blended some tones. We'll get to that, but I'm also connecting this to a real cabinet and micing it up. So we're going to dive into all those recording details as well. Now, the guitar I'm using, this is my ESP E-II Horizon FR-7, and it is equipped with the EMG 707 pickups. These are active pickups. I know most of you have seen this guitar on multiple videos, but I wanted to share it for those who maybe haven't seen the guitar yet. Before we get to the tones, let's go over what my settings are on the AMPED. And hey, you can mimic these settings on your amplifier or your amp sim, whatever you're using. Hey, try them out and see what it sounds like. First of all, I'm using their overdrive channel. There are 3 channels on here. I'm using the overdrive, and I've got it set on the OD2, which of course is the higher gain setting. I do have my boost on. We'll get to that in a second. So let's go through the EQ first. I actually boosted my bass a little. Sometimes I'll cut my bass back because that sounds better in the overall mix when you add in things like bass and drums and all that good stuff. My mids, those are boosted quite a bit. I know some of you, and I used to do this all the time, some of us like to cut the mids. You get that justice for all tone. But in this case with the 7-string, I actually had those boosted to around 7-ish. My highs are boosted just a bit too, somewhere between 6 and 7. I don't have the gain cranked all the way up, but I do have it probably somewhere between 7 and 8 here. Now, the boost on the Blackstar AMPED, you've got 2 choices. You can go pre or post. If you go post, well, that just acts as an overall volume booster. I believe that's how it works. If you go pre, this acts as an overdrive pedal. So I did have that on. I do have a touch of reverb. I actually like the way the reverb sounds on this unit. It's pretty cool. And as you can see, my presence is boosted just a little there. Now, the tube simulation, this thing is an actual power amp, but it has a tube simulation. I'm using the EL34, and as you can see right by that, we've got this ISF setting, which is pretty cool. I've got that leaning towards the British side there. That just gives you a little bit darker tone, in my opinion. I like the way that sounds. Real quick, this isn't so much relevant to going direct into your DAW or your interface or your computer, but it is relevant when you're connecting this to a cabinet. So you've got your power settings on here. You can go 1, 20, or 100 watts. In this case, I've got it set on 20 watts in a 10 by 11 room here. That's pretty loud, and I was able to get a good signal with the mic with the 20-watt setting. The first tone I want you to hear, and this is just going to be a raw tone, no tracks or anything like that, just the guitar here. This is the Blackstar AMPED going directly through my interface into my DAW, and of course I'm using what they call Cab Rig. So this is their cab and mic simulation, speaker simulation, all that good stuff. So here's what this tone sounds like, and then I'll go over the settings. The tone you just heard, and we're going to hear it in the full mix in a second too, that's using, and I'm going into the Cab Rig software. I've got this connected to my computer, and you can pull up their Blackstar Architects, what the software is called, and you can adjust everything through this software here, which is pretty cool. Going to the cab here, I'm using what's called their UK Classic, and I've got the 121 ribbon mic, and I've got that set to on axis. And so far, and I've only had this thing for about a week or so, but so far this is my favorite combination, my favorite cab and mic combination for the AMPED. Now, there's one tiny little drawback to this, but there is a workaround, and that's that you can't move the mic. I kind of wish you could just take your mouse and drag the mic over a little bit, you know, further away from the cone or wherever you want it. You can't do that. However, you can see there are other settings on here, and there are actually presets for the mic. So I'm actually using the 121 preset. Now, of course, you can go in and make other adjustments to that as well. You also have the type of room that you're in here. So you can use these adjustments, and that kind of mimics moving the mic. Now, I would rather just roll my mouse over there and move it a little bit, but hey, at least we have these other settings that we can dial in. That being said, let's hear that in the full mix. Now, this is not the full mix you heard in the intro. This is just using the Cab Rig software. One thing I forgot to share about the full mix you just heard. So most of you know, and this is a recording tip, I always record 2 rhythm tracks. I'll record a track, then I'll hard pan that track to the left, then I'll record another track, a brand new track, and I'll hard pan that one to the right. That just gives you this really full sound. Now you might ask, well, why don't you just record one track and duplicate it? Well, all that does is just raise the volume. It does absolutely nothing. What you're wanting to capture here are those little nuances between the 2 guitars. Plus, with that second guitar, as you guys heard, I use that to harmonize a few of those notes. So it's just a really cool recording strategy. And of course, a lot of bands and musicians use this strategy. Along with that, for that second guitar, I usually like to use a slightly different tone. For this track, I use the USA Modern 4x12, and I use the 121 ribbon mic on Axis, and everything else is pretty much the same. This is where things get pretty interesting. So the track that you're about to hear, and this is just going to be one guitar, is me connecting the Blackstar AMPED to a real cab. I'm using my EVH cab, it's a 212 cab, and as you can see, I've got it mic'd up with a good old Shure SM57 mic. Now I've got that running directly into my interface. I've got some other inputs on the back of my interface here. This is the PreSonus Quantum 2, by the way, and of course I'm using the PreSonus Studio One software. I think I've been using that software since like 2009, so it's kind of all I know. But in any case, this is what the Blackstar AMPED sounds like with a 7-string guitar mic'd up to a real cab. Beefy, pretty meaty. Now we need to hear what that sounds like in the full mix. Back to my point I made earlier about having just a slightly different tone for that second guitar. What I do in this case, if I'm micing a cab, I'll often just move the mic a little bit so it's not in the exact same position as what I recorded the first guitar with. This gives me just that slight little variance. That's all I'm looking for. We're not looking for a completely different tone or sound, just a slight variance. And again, in my opinion, it just gives you more of a lively mix along with those little nuances between the 2 guitars, especially when you're doing some harmonies with your rhythm guitars like what you're about to hear. Now it's probably a good time to bring up the sponsor of this video here. So Blackstar is sponsoring this video, and I want to give them a huge shout out, guys. Thank you so much for sending me this AMP3. It's a pretty cool amp here. And again, guys, this thing is a real amp. By the way, if you didn't catch my video on the full demonstration and really just digging in, going behind the scenes and showing you how the AMP3 works, I've got a video on that. I'll leave it up here and I'll put that in the description of the video as well. I'm actually going to end the video with this full mix that you're about to hear. So I'm going to tell you what I did first before we get to that. So let's go into my studio. As you can see, I've got all 4 tracks. Remember, I record 2 rhythm tracks, right? And hard pan each one. That's one song, right? That's one tone. I did that for the AMP3 using the Cab Rig. I also did the same thing using a real cabinet. 2 guitars, okay? So I've got 4 guitar tracks here. Well, This is blending all of these tones together. I kind of liked the real cab a little bit better. I like the Amped 3 with the EVH cab mic'd up a little bit better than the Cab Rig tone. I can't say much better, but I don't know, there's just a little difference there. So what I did in this case is I had that as my main tracks, okay? The volume is up a little more on those tracks, but I just barely brought the volume up with the Cab Rig tracks just to kind of fill in a little bit, and I thought that really sounded great, and you're about to hear that, well, right now. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting my channel. I do appreciate you. Please give this a thumbs up if you liked it. And hey, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Do check out the links in the description of this video. I've got a link going to the Blackstar Amp 3. I've also got links, of course, to all my guitar courses, my free practice guide, my music, and so forth. So hey, it would mean a lot to me if you'd spend some time in the description of this video. As always, keep it metal.